Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tearing into a subject that I think feels intensely personal for so many of us. That frustrating feeling of being stuck,
Yes.
the mystery of why we procrastinate on things we know are good for us,
Right.
and just the subtle ways we seem to trip ourselves up, even when opportunities are, like, staring us in the face.
Yeah, that gap between potential and reality.
Exactly. It's that gap. So we've pulled together some really compelling insights from a stack of valuable researches, and there's a particularly powerful TEDx talk in there to try and figure out what's actually going on, sort of under the hood.
And what's really striking in this material, I think, is the argument that it's often not about a lack of resources or opportunity. That's the usual explanation, isn't it?
Yeah, the go-to.
But think about the examples highlighted in the researches. You've got Colonel Sanders starting KFC at 65 after countless failures, Oprah Winfrey overcoming, well, immense challenges.
Helen Keller.
Helen Keller defying everything that seemed possible, or even Albert Einstein, failing initial entrance exams.
Yeah.
These were people who arguably started with very limited resources or face huge obstacles.
Right.
Yet they created these extraordinary lives. So it really makes you ask, if it's not the external stuff, then what is the real source of limitation?
Right. Because logically you think, well, if you have the opportunity, you've got the intelligence, the desire, why don't you just do the thing?
Exactly.
And these insights, they point to a core dynamic tension inside us. On one hand, your nervous system absolutely loves comfort. It craves predictability, ease, the known path.
Survival mode, efficiency.
Yeah, it's built for survival and efficiency.
But the fascinating counterpoint these researchers reveal is that our deeper essence, call it spirit, potential, whatever, it's wired for growth. It yearns for expansion, creativity, new experiences, challenge. So you have this fundamental conflict playing out.
Yep.
One part is trying to keep you safe and comfy in the status quo, while another part is calling you towards something more, something bigger.
And navigating that internal tug of war. That's where a lot of that stuck feeling comes from.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Okay, so where does this internal conflict even start? Where does it come from? The material we looked at suggests it's really deeply rooted in our early development. They talk about how the neocortex,
The thinking brain.
the part responsible for critical thinking, logic, operating in those faster alpha-beta brainwave states, it doesn't really fully come online until around age 7.
And before that, children spend a lot of time in delta and theta brainwave states.
Which are?
Incredibly open, impressionable states, almost like a dream state, really. There's very little critical filtering happening.
Okay.
It's why you can tell a young child something completely outlandish, and they might just accept it as absolute truth.
Right, yeah.
This is why that early period is so critical. It echoes that famous quote often attributed to Aristotle, "Give me the child for 7 years, and I'll give you the man."
Because what goes in during those years gets absorbed very, very differently than later in life.
Exactly. No filter.
Okay, here's where it gets really poignant, and the researchers use this powerful example. Picture little Johnny with his dad in a store. Dad's stressed, overwhelmed, maybe had a bad day at work, who knows? Little Johnny sees a toy cleverly placed right at his eye level, and he asks for it. Dad, lost in his own, big world problems and frustration, just snaps back. Maybe he says something like, "No, you can't have it. You don't deserve it. You're not good enough. You never behave."
Oof, yeah. And what does little Johnny hear? He doesn't process his dad's stress, the bills, the bad day.
No.
Operating without that critical filter, he hears, "I am not good enough. I am not worth it. I am undeserving."
Wow.
And these insights propose that unconsciously, a large part of his life might then be spent subconsciously acting out behaviors that justify that deeply ingrained belief.
So, like, if success starts to threaten that internal story of "I'm not good enough."
Self-sabotage can become the default response to maintain that internal consistency, even if it's negative.
Wow. So the core idea here, presented almost like a fundamental law of personal growth in these researches, is that people will never consistently rise above their own deep-seated opinion of themselves.
That's the crux of it.
And this self-opinion, it's largely solidified before age 7, based on their perception of whether they were truly loved or inherently worthy, regardless of external stuff like achievements.
Exactly. And the material makes a striking parallel here. They call it the first law of relationships. No one can ever truly love you more than you love yourself.
Mm.
Both these laws, if you will, they underscore how profoundly these early, often unconscious beliefs about our own worthiness impact absolutely everything: our potential for growth, our capacity for success, even our ability to receive love.
So the limits we feel, they aren't necessarily external walls out there.
But potentially internal boundaries set decades ago, operating below our conscious awareness.
That completely reframes the problem, doesn't it? Okay, so building on that, if these deep roots are planted in childhood, how do they operate in our daily lives now?
Right. How does it show up?
This brings us to the next crucial point from the sources. We are creatures of habit. Your brain, specifically the conscious part, the frontal lobe, it uses a lot of energy.
It loves efficiency.
It loves efficiency. So when you repeat an action or a thought pattern enough times, it creates a shortcut. It moves that behavior or reaction to the midbrain.
Automating the process, basically. Think about learning to walk or drive a car. Initially, it takes intense conscious focus.
Oh, yeah.
But eventually, you just do it. You might arrive at work and barely remember the actual drive.
Happens all the time.
Because your midbrain was navigating on autopilot. It's incredibly useful for complex physical tasks. But, and this is the key point, it also applies to seemingly small decisions, small thoughts.
Like choosing fries over a salad again and again.
Exactly. Repeatedly choosing the easy option, the familiar comfort, can become an unconscious habit. You just do it because it's the default path, not because you consciously weighed the pros and cons this time.
And this is where that really vivid analogy from the material comes in, painting a picture of your mind. They say your conscious mind. It's like an ant.
Tiny, right. Maybe 5% of your total processing power.
Focused, determined, setting goals. Like, okay, I'm going to march north. I'm going to achieve this.
But your unconscious mind, that's the elephant. A colossal 95% carrying all those ingrained habits, those unresolved issues, those limiting patterns. And unfortunately, for many people, that elephant is heading south.
Oh, boy.
And what happens to the ant, no matter how determined it is, if it's sitting on the back of an elephant that's determined to go the other way?
It's futile. The ant's going south, too.
Exactly. All that conscious effort, all that willpower is fighting against this vastly more powerful unconscious force. This, right here, is a perfect illustration of self-sabotage.
Your intentions are good. They're valid.
But your underlying patterns are running the show.
It makes so much sense why just trying harder often feels like banging your head against a wall. It doesn't work long term.
Right. And the sources use another great analogy here, like a compass needle. Your conscious mind can grab that needle for a moment, maybe 5% of the time, and point it anywhere.
Like deciding, okay, I'm feeling down, I'll watch a comedy.
Or I'm tired, I need connection, I'll call a friend. You can consciously choose that.
Okay.
But 95% of the time, when you let go, when you're on autopilot, that needle drifts back to its default magnetic north.
And as we discussed, for many people, that default magnetic north has been programmed, often unconsciously, towards negativity, limitation, or maybe just comfort over growth.
Which leads directly, really, to the third critical insight from these researches. Environment trumps will.
Ooh, say that again. Environment trumps will.
Yeah. Your best intentions, your strongest willpower. They will almost always be overpowered by your environment over time.
It feels a bit harsh, maybe, but the analogies they use are pretty convincing.
They are. It's like saying, I really intend to love jazz music, but you only ever listen to, say, heavy metal, day in, day out.
Your intention doesn't stand a chance against the constant exposure.
Exactly. Or deciding you really want to be warm, but you choose to live permanently inside a giant freezer.
Not gonna happen.
Or trying to get healthy while surrounding yourself constantly with people who smoke. The environment isn't just a backdrop. It's this constant, powerful programming force.
Yeah, okay. I see that.
And this ties into what they refer to as the law of conformity. You tend to become like the people you spend the most time with. It's almost unavoidable.
So if you hang out with 9 people who are constantly complaining, finding fault,
you're likely to become the 10th. Conversely, spend time with 9 people who are positive, supportive, growth-oriented.
you'll likely gravitate towards that energy too.
It's the environment's subtle, continuous programming that either wears down or reinforces your conscious will. It's always working.
Okay, so we've covered the deep roots in childhood, the powerful unconscious habits, the elephant, and this overwhelming influence of environment. It sounds, well, a bit daunting, honestly.
It can feel that way, yeah.
Is there anything we can actually do about this, or are we just stuck with our programming?
Well, the good news is the researchers we explored don't just diagnose the problem. They offer 3 surprisingly simple yet powerful steps to start shaping this dynamic. practical things.
Okay, good. Let's hear them.
All right, they break it down very practically. The first key is stop putting the wrong things in.
Stop putting the wrong things in. Okay, unpack that. What are the wrong things?
Well, just like our bodies adapt to our physical environment, temperature, altitude, our minds adapt to our mental environment. And the two biggest unconscious inputs highlighted in this material are, 1, mainstream media, and 2, your peer group.
Ah, okay. Media and peer group. And the critique of mainstream media here is pretty sharp.
It is quite pointed, yeah. They argue that the primary function of a lot of mainstream media isn't objective news reporting. It's actually stimulating your amygdala.
The fear center.
Exactly. That part of your brain that's highly sensitive to threat and negativity. Why? Because negativity grabs attention more effectively, especially in a crowded information space.
Which drives engagement, clicks, eyeballs.
And ultimately, advertising revenue. They use this provocative line. If you think the media is just reporting news, you're living in Disneyland.
Wow. That's a strong statement. The comparison they make is almost binary. You cannot consume typical news media constantly and expect to consistently feel positive. The inputs are incompatible.
It's like saying you want to be healthy, but you keep smoking. The actions contradict the goal.
Yeah.
They use this really good flashlight analogy. Imagine you're in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. There's incredible stuff happening all around, immense beauty, growth, life, complexity. But the media often takes your flashlight, your focus, and shines it only on the snake eating a rat over in the corner. That's the story they want you to see, to react to.
Because it triggers that amygdala response.
Precisely. But you have the power. You can take your own flashlight and choose to point it at the hummingbird being born or the incredible flower opening. It's a conscious choice about where you direct your attention, because whatever you consistently focus on, that's what grows in your experience.
Okay, so being mindful of media consumption. What about the other one? Peer group.
The material is quite direct here, too. It essentially says, while you can't choose your family, you absolutely can choose your friends.
Love your family, choose your friends.
Something like that. Your chosen friends, the people you spend voluntary time with, are a constant, powerful programming force. Consciously or unconsciously, they influence your mindset, your conversations, your behaviors daily.
So, step 1 is about becoming really aware of what you're allowing into your mental space and being brave enough, maybe, to filter out the negative inputs.
Yes. Curate your mental diet.
Which naturally leads, I guess, to the second key. Start putting the right things in. If you stop consuming the negativity, what should you replace it with?
And this is where the material gets quite hopeful, emphasizing the incredible era we live in. We have unprecedented access to positive, inspirational, educational resources.
Like podcasts.
Podcasts like this one, hopefully. Interviews with people who've overcome amazing challenges, books that expand your thinking, studying the lives of remarkable individuals who achieve things against the odds.
So these aren't just like entertainment.
They're framed as opportunities. Opportunities to consciously program your mind in a positive direction, to feed the growth side of that internal conflict we talked about.
So making a conscious, deliberate effort, maybe daily or at least weekly, to expose yourself to information and ideas that support your growth, your potential.
Exactly. It helps, using that earlier analogy, to remagnetize your internal compass towards a more positive, empowered default setting.
Instead of letting it drift back to the old negative north.
Precisely. And the point is made quite strongly. If you don't consciously choose your inputs, you are by default being programmed by external forces.
Whether it's the media's agenda or
maybe just ending up as an extra in someone else's life story because you're constantly reacting to their environment, their needs, their drama, rather than living your own life intentionally.
Okay. Stop putting the wrong things in. Start putting the right things in. What's the third piece of this puzzle?
The third key is get the things that shouldn't be in there out.
The deeper stuff.
This is often the deepest work, yes. And the researchers strongly suggest that for this part, working with a skilled mentor or a coach, someone who genuinely understands human behavior and these unconscious dynamics, is invaluable.
Why specifically a coach or mentor?
Because they can help you identify and unpack those deep-seated unconscious patterns the elephant's programming that you often can't see clearly yourself. We all have blind spots.
Right. Because you can teach the ant all the best time management techniques, all the goal-setting strategies.
But if the elephant's programming is pulling it south towards, say, a feel of failure or a feeling of unworthiness, the ant's new skills won't make much difference in the long run. The material shares a really powerful example of this. A client came in thinking they desperately needed time management skills. That was the presenting problem.
Okay, seems common enough.
Very common. On the surface, their calendar was overflowing. They felt constantly overwhelmed. A typical coach might just jump in and teach them prioritization techniques, scheduling hacks, that kind of thing.
Which seems logical, right? To fix the symptom.
It does seem logical. But these insights highlight that after just a few minutes of deeper conversation, it became clear the real unconscious pattern wasn't about time management at all.
What was it then?
It was a deep-seated, unconscious inability to deal with the fear of rejection.
Wow. How did that connect to time management?
This unconscious pattern led them to say yes to almost every request, every opportunity, every demand on their time, because saying no felt terrifying. It felt like risking rejection, or it triggered their own deep fear of being rejected or letting people down.
So the overflowing calendar wasn't the problem.
It was a symptom of the deeper unconscious pattern, the fear of rejection running the show.
Wow. So teaching them time management wouldn't have fixed the root cause at all.
Not sustainably. The real leverage, the real change, came from addressing that core fear, that unconscious driver. It really underlines the idea that sometimes the problem we think we have isn't the actual root cause.
Yeah.
And it shows why, according to these sources, perhaps the most important investment you can make isn't necessarily just in external skills or more workshops.
But in understanding and mastering yourself, your own internal world.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating about this material is how it connects this personal journey, this idea of self-mastery, to a much broader historical perspective.
So
They argue that mastering the game of self-understanding your own psychology, your patterns, your triggers, has been the consistent #1 recommendation from those who have achieved great things throughout history.
So it's not a new idea.
Not at all. It's presented as the foundation that allows you to hold your center, to remain calm and decisive, even when chaos is erupting all around you.
To be the eye of the storm.
Exactly. To be able to respond to uncertainty with clarity, with that grounded feeling of, okay, stuff's hitting the fan, but move, I'll handle it.
That commitment to understanding and working with your own internal landscape, your self-mastery. The researchers present this as the single best way to unlock your potential and actually become the best version of yourself.
And the final point these insights leave us with, which I think is really beautiful, is the ripple effect.
Okay.
By focusing on mastering yourself, on becoming that more integrated, aware version of you, you naturally become the example. You become the invitation for others to consider their own potential.
Because, as they emphasize, people aren't usually inspired to change because you tell them what to do or lecture them.
No, rarely works.
They're inspired by observing you, by seeing someone embody the qualities they might aspire to, calmness, resilience, purpose, whatever it is. You become an invitation, not an imposition.
And this is how, ultimately, we can make the most significant positive difference in the world. It loops back to that principle often attributed to Gandhi, which is also mentioned in this material. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Start with yourself.
Start with yourself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into these really powerful insights, we've kind of journeyed from understanding that paradox of potential, that feeling that limitations are often internal, not external,
Right.
through the deep roots in childhood programming and the power of our self-opinion. We've wrestled with the reality of our unconscious habits, that ant versus the elephant, and seen how profoundly environment shapes us, often overriding even our strongest willpower.
But critically, we've also uncovered the path forward that's presented here. Consciously filtering out the negative inputs.
Stop putting the wrong things in.
Actively seeking out the positive ones.
Start putting the right things in.
And doing that deeper, often supported work to release old, unhelpful patterns.
Get the things that shouldn't be in there out.
Exactly. With the ultimate goal being self-mastery, which unlocks personal potential and, almost as a byproduct, creates this ripple effect of inspiration around you.
So, given the profound impact of unconscious programming and environment that these researchers really lay out, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. What is one tiny conscious choice you could make today? Just one small action to begin shifting your own internal compass needle, just a little bit, away from that old default and towards growth and positivity. What input will you consciously filter out maybe, or what positive input will you deliberately seek? Just one small thing.